Well, it's 11 o'clock and we will get started. Good morning to everyone. My name is Larry Jewell from the Edmonton Pride Seniors Group. It's November the 3rd, 2022, and I do thank you all for attending our weekly Aging with Pride discussion group for the LGBTQ2S plus seniors and allies. Thank you too to our partners, SAGE and the Pride Center of Edmonton. Before I introduce our speaker, I must acknowledge that we are located on Treaty 6 territory and respect the histories, languages, and cultures of First Nations, Métis, Inuit, and all First Peoples of Canada, whose presence continues to enrich our lives. Two housekeeping items. Firstly, to let you know that this session it will be recorded for future use on our YouTube channel. If you don't wish your image to be recorded, please simply close your video feed. And secondly, I'll remind you of the code of conduct outlined in the Zoom invitation. And it's a great pleasure and an honor to introduce Murray Billett. Murray is widely known as a human rights activist, a conflict resolution specialist, educator, and advocate for the LGBTQ2S plus community. A former member of the Alberta Review Board, about which he speaks today, and the Edmonton Police Commission, a past educator, labor relations officer for the United Nurses of Alberta. He has spent decades on advocacy work on various boards and committees, and where the necessary boards and committees didn't exist, he created them. Murray, over to you, and thank you for being here.
Well, good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. And I'm in a much beautiful weather today compared to what we were dealing with yesterday. The review board is really complex and really interesting. I think it's one of the most difficult and challenging boards that I was involved in over the years. And at the base of the review board is mental health and dealing with people with mental health. And the aspect that the review board deals with is forensic psychology. And I'm going to let Dr. Jewell kind of explain forensic psychology compared to the day-to-day stuff that Larry used to do. If you'd help me out, and we'll start there, Larry, and then I'm going to go into a little bit of fast facts about mental health, and then we'll get into the review board.
Firstly, I'm not going to talk about forensic psychology, but rather the specific domain of forensic psychiatry. The difference really is one is a broader science, the second is part of medical practice. Now, I'm not a psychiatrist of any variety, although the specialty I did practice, pathology, is another specialty that's got a very significant forensic component in some areas of practice. So what I've done is gone to the Royal College of Physicians and Surgeons of Canada and looked at some of the documents regarding the definition and issues in forensic psychiatry. So very simply, it's a branch of medicine, a branch specifically of psychiatry, concerned with the intersection of mental health and the legal system. And I'm going to read now from their definition of practices in forensic psychiatry. And I quote from the Royal College, as psychiatrists intersecting with the legal system, forensic psychiatrists have two roles. Firstly, a clinical role in which they provide psychiatric assessment and ongoing care, very like any other physician would do. And secondly, and the area that Murray will talk more about, a forensic assessment role in which they provide evidence-based opinions on matters such as questions of capacity, criminal responsibility, fitness to stand trial, and risk assessment. In that capacity, that forensic capacity, there is a duty to provide opinions that are fair, objective, and nonpartisan, even if the opinion may appear to be adverse to the evaluee. Now, I'm going to editorialize a bit here. This isn't the Royal College speaking, it's me. There's a lot to be unpacked in there. And the obvious thing is the potential for conflict between the clinical role and the forensic role. The question is the person being evaluated your patient, or is the legal system your, in quotes, patient, sort of like public health as the public thing? And because of that, there's also a question, what is objective? And all of the other adjectives. And given the uncertainty of some natures of some parts of psychiatry, that also potentially an issue. So it's not surprising, and I'll go back to the Royal College document from our last sentence, that that it reminds, well, in this case, trainees, that it is incumbent on the forensic psychiatrist to establish the nature of the encounter and to clarify his or her role with the patient or evaluee. And the fact that there are, at various times and in various circumstances, the psychiatrist can have one or the other of those roles. But if he or she isn't sure what role is being held out, then obviously there is a possibility. Murray, I hope that's what you wanted, and I'll turn the talk back to you.
Thank you, Larry. That's exactly what I was looking for, and I knew I could count on you to be much more articulate than I'm able to be in explaining that. And it adds to the complexity. So we're talking about forensic psychology, we're talking about the judicial system, we're talking about the criminal code, and we're talking about legislation that applies to the Alberta Review Board. Every province in the country has a review board, and interestingly, it plays out differently in different provinces, subject to the government of the day. And I'll just give you a quick background. I was on until early 2019 when the UCP government was involved, and I was involved in educating. As a matter of the fact, the document that I'm working off of today is one that I put together for the chair of the review board in 2019, and I helped train the new chair of the review board. And subsequent to the completion and education of that review board chair, I got the heave-ho, and as a result of that and political interference, the review board resigned en masse. So now the review board is filled with a number of panelists that come with some baggage and some controversy, but they've marched through COVID and got the job done. So it just adds to the political drama, the clinical drama, the legal drama of it all. But it's all rooted on mental health and addiction, you guys. And I think everybody that's listening today and tuned in realize that there isn't a family out there that doesn't deal with some kind of mental health issue. In any given year, 1 in 5 people in Canada will personally experience mental health problems or illnesses. Mental health affects people of all ages, incomes, and cultures. Approximately 8% of adults will experience major depression at some point in their lives, and about 1% of Canadians will experience bipolar disorder or manic depression. And we see a lot of bipolar and schizophrenia and manic depression in the people that we're dealing with at the review board, the patients or clients as we call them. So it's very common. By age of 40, 50% of the population will have had to deal with some sort of mental illness. Schizophrenia impacts about 1% of Canadians. Anxiety disorders around 5%. Suicide accounts for 24% of all deaths among 15 to 24-year-olds and 16% among 25 to 44 years old. And suicide is one of the leading causes of death in both men and women from adolescence to middle age. And the mortality rate due to suicide among men is 4 times the rate amongst women. And those of you that know me, I lost my youngest son in 2013 to suicide. And so my family, like many other families, have been impacted by suicide. And you wonder why does this happen? What causes it? And it's complex. It's an interplay of genetics, biology, personality, environmental factors that cause mental illnesses. Almost half of those who feel that they have suffered from depression or anxiety have never go to the doctor. And that's another complicating factor as well. And anybody that's tried to get any kind of mental help, never mind psychological help these days, particularly in the last couple of years, it does make it very difficult. And then you add to that the damn stigma. And that's the part that really bothers me. And that's why when I have an opportunity to talk about mental health and addiction, I talk openly and honestly about it. I talk about my son. That's a part of how I honor him and try to confront the stigma of mental health and addictions, because it does present a real serious barrier to wellness and to people getting help. The economic cost of mental health in Canada in the healthcare system was estimated 7.9 billion, and this is back in 1998. And 4.7 billion in care, 3.2 billion in disability and early death. And then we talk about how it impacts youth. And many of us are seniors and a little older, and we look over our shoulder at our families and friends that have younger members of their both biological family and then what I like to refer to as our logical families, which many of us have and are closer to some of our friends than we are to our own family. So how does it impact youth? Estimated that 10 to 20% of Canadian youth are affected by mental illness or disorder, the single most disabling group of disorders worldwide, you guys. Total approximate 5% of male youth, 12% of female youth aged 12 to 19 have experienced major depressive episodes. And the total number of 12 to 19-year-olds in Canada are at risk for developing depression is a staggering 3.2 million kids. Once depression is recognized, it can make a difference for 80% of the people who are impacted, allowing them to get back to their regular activities. And mental illness is increasingly threatening the lives of our children, with Canada's youth suicide rate the third highest in the industrialized world. And that's kind of shocking statistic that in Canada, in the industrialized world, that we're facing those kinds of numbers. So I'll just move away from the broad brush mental health side of things and talk a little bit about the review board. And I just want to, there might be some impacts to some of you, because I'm going to talk a little bit about what we look at within the patients. And then once we hear from the treatment team at the Alberta Hospital. Alberta Hospital houses all of the not criminally responsible, those profoundly mentally ill people that are held out at Alberta Hospital. And the treatment team consists of psychologists, psychiatrists, and all kinds of specialists in the field of mental health. So what we look at and what the physicians and treatment team look at are things like how present or relevant are the following things. So we're looking at, is it present? And if it is present, how relevant is it? So we're looking at things like violence, antisocial behavior, relationships, employment, substance use. Is there a major mental disorder? Is there a personality disorder? Have there been traumatic events or experiences in their lives? Do they have violent attitudes? And my goodness, we've dealt with some profoundly violent people in front of the review board, and I'll get into that a little bit later. Treatment or supervision response. Are they being compliant? Are they taking their medication? Are they being combative? Are they cooperating? Those kinds of things. And from a clinical scale, we take a look at do they have insight? Do they understand what's going on? Do they have violent ideation of intent? So the people that have the schizophrenic meltdowns, like the DeGroote kid in Calgary that murdered 5 of his friends. Symptoms of major mental disorder, instability, treatment or supervision response. Again, are they being compliant? Are they working with us? because when they're combative or don't cooperate with us, that gives us the responsibility to hold them longer if they aren't working and responding properly to both treatment and medication. Then we look at professional services from a risk management side of things. We look at their living situation, access to professional services, personal support, treatment, supervision response, and stress and how they're coping. So that kind of gives you a set of boxes that we look at, that we review from individual to individual when they're in front of us. Now, at any given hearing, I'll give you the snapshot of how the hearing goes. There's generally 5 of us on the panel. It's chaired by generally a judge or a highly qualified lawyer. Then there's psychologists, psychiatrists, and then there's at least 1 member of the public, and that's what I was on the review board. So we hear evidence from the treatment team in terms of how is that patient doing? Are they following their medication protocols? If they're out with their supervisory people, are they being compliant with them? So we look at those kinds of things. So we hear from the treatment team, we hear from the lawyer for the patient, and then we hear from the lawyer for the government, for the Alberta government. So they have agency at the review board. So there's a lawyer for the government, the treatment team, and the lawyer that is responsible for working with the patient. And so the 5 of us hear evidence from those 3 divisions within the review board. As a board member, we have the right, the responsibility, and obligation to ensure that the criminal code is being followed, and we have the right to ask questions and get appropriate answers. And again, they have lawyers with them, so sometimes the lawyers will intervene, and so then we get into judicial rules and rules of evidence. So it just adds to the levels of complexities of this. So at the end of the day, we hear from, we'll talk about Bob today. We'll take Bob out of the air there and say Bob's in front of the board, and we've heard from the treatment team that Bob's doing okay, and he's taking his medication, and he's been held for the last 8 months at Alberta Hospital. His family's helping him. He's been very responsive to treatment, those kinds of things. And then we take all of that evidence and the presentation from those parties, and then we meet and we have to put together what's called board or pre-board recommendations. So is this person going to attend their outpatient services properly? Are they going to maintain good mental health? Are they going to attend the review board? So we can make them come back every month, every 2 months, every year, depending on the seriousness of what we're dealing with. We can say you can't contact your brother, your mother, your friend, or the person that you assaulted. So we can have no contact orders. And we ensure that if they're involved, they will attend their drug and alcohol treatments programs wherever they're going. Abstain from use of alcohol, non-prescription drugs, or cannabis. Prohibition of weapons, and keep the peace and be of good behavior. First and foremost, they can't be in a position where they're going to harm themselves or others. That's the big piece of law that we are responsible to ensure. And this was where the controversy comes in. How do we know for sure, based on what we hear from the treatment team, from the lawyer for the government of Alberta, and from the lawyer of the patient, how can we be assured that that individual, that Bob, isn't going to hurt himself or other people? So then we take a look, based on all of that, what privileges can these people have at this point in their treatment? So we look at, can they have supervised ground visits with staff or a responsible adult? Can they go to the mall, either supervised or with a responsible adult? Can they have supervised passes to go to their family in Red Deer or in the farm in rural Alberta? How are they going to function there? Can they attend staff supervised camping trips, picnics, or other recreational outings? supervised grounds visits, so we can restrict them every minute of the day, every hour of the day, based on their behavior and what we've learned from the three people, or the three parties presenting to our board. So they can get unsupervised grounds pass, or sometimes they have to be supervised. Some of them are real badasses and they have to have one, sometimes two people with them, because they're that unwell at that point. Then we also look at passes. Can they go out for the weekend, over Christmas or holidays or my parents' anniversary, or those kinds of things? So we look at how many days can they go, how many nights can they go, where can they go, can they travel for 1 day, 3 days, 5 days? We control all of that. And then we look at approved accommodation, where if they are going to travel, if they are going to go someplace else, are they going to be supervised? Is it going to be 24-hour supervision? Are they going to be in a group home, or are they going to be held at the hospital? So that's one of the check boxes that I'll just hold up, that you can see that we have all those choices to make based on what we hear at that hearing. And I'll just say at this point, what's fascinating to me, as much as we know about mental health and as much as we understand about forensic psychiatry and the incredibly searingly intelligent people we have working within the system and helping people and families get their lives back together, it's still somebody's best guess. This doctor is going to say, well, I think this, this, and this based on that. The lawyer is going to say, well, here's my interpretation of what I just heard from Dr. Joe, and this is my presentation based on that. So it's really, to be honest with you guys, it's everybody's best guess at what's going to happen based on past behavior, based on case law, because we are held by the Criminal Code of Canada. It's called the WINCO test, and WINCO is a patient that took their review board decision all the way to the Supreme Court of Canada. And that's where are they going to be safe to themselves, and they are going to be safe around others. And that's the big test, is those two very, it sounds easy. They're not going to hurt themselves. They're not going to hurt anybody else. And we should be able to agree. But again, you take a look at what everybody's suggested or explained, and have they been compliant with their medication? Are they listening to their supervisor? And then you roll in the varying degrees of mental illness, schizophrenia, all of those kinds of things that impact what they do every day, and then the medications that they have to take, and how does that play out within each individual person? So it's highly complicated and so very interesting. So in order to get to in front of the Alberta Review Board, they have to be declared not criminally responsible. NCR, or NCRMD is the actual term, not criminally responsible because of a mental disorder. And to get that declaration, it is not easy. People think it's, oh, I'm just going to say that I'm crazy, I've got a mental illness, and I'm going to get off. I'm going to get away with murder. I'm going to get away with assault, whatever the case may be. But statistically, people are held longer within the system under the review board than they're held criminally in prison institutions, jails, and those kinds of things. So the complexities of the review board and the standard is much higher in terms of the level of wellness that they have to present. So to get that not criminally or NCR designation, it has to come through the courts. And here in Alberta, we have a mental health court, where if we have somebody that is extremely unwell, they can be put in front of the mental health court. And the mental health court specializes in people dealing with mental health issues. So it's just not an easy designation to get, being not criminally responsible. Or the other term you'll hear is unfit to stand trial. So NCR or UFST, NCR, UF, unfit to stand trial, not criminally responsible. So really, at the end of the day, once we've looked at the check sheet that I showed you, and I told you how we manage each of those clients or patients, we have three choices at the end of the day based on what we've heard. We have the responsibility to determine whether that person should be subject to a detention order, a conditional discharge, or granted an absolute discharge. And if we grant them an absolute discharge, they're free to go. They can go where they want, when they want. They're a free person. And then, of course, with conditional discharge, that's when we get into supervision, and they have to be with their parents or a guardian or somebody from Alberta Hospital. But those are the three areas, the three choices that we really have. The detention order, which speaks for itself, they're held at Alberta Hospital. Detention order, conditional discharge, or granted the absolute discharge. So there's, when I was on board, there was 11 people on the review board. I'm not sure how many are on right now. And we were managing, and I finished in the spring of 2019, was on for almost 3 years. And when I was on board, we were managing 220 people, 220 files. And currently, I just called the Alberta Review Board yesterday. Interestingly, they're only dealing with 160 people. And to me, I see that playing out. I'm looking out over Jasper Avenue and 113th Street now. I see that mental health component on the streets. And if you live downtown, or if you've been in different parts of our city, we see the mental health that plays out on the street in such a profound way, in homelessness and mental health and addiction. So I'm wondering what the review board is doing and why those numbers are so very low. And it really concerns me, because if we don't deal with mental health and addiction, and I'm not just talking about review board perspective, I'm talking about dealing with mental health properly, what happens is those people are back out onto the streets, and then it gets into the recidivism. They're on the streets, they're doing survival crimes, they're stealing petty crimes, or survival sex. They'll get into the sex trade just to make the money to survive. And that plays out day to day in the streets. So they're going on the street, into the police car, through the police station, through the judicial system, back out onto the street, rinse and repeat. So that's why, my dedication to mental health and addiction is to remind people the extraordinary cost of not dealing properly with mental health and addiction. Sorry, I did a bit of a rant there, you guys. It's something I just take very personally when you see that much pain and agony out there around mental health and addiction. So we have all of that, all of the review board members. Like I said, there was 11 of us when we were on board, and all have a depth and breadth of experience. And again, when I was chosen, my background, I've done, my work with the Police Commission, my work with the nurses. I did a lot of arbitration, a lot of quasi-judicial review panel work. So they want people, a broad brush of experience with judicial, quasi-judicial hearings, those kinds of things. So it's really interesting with the level of expertise on the actual review board, and how we can work together to acutely listen to what we're being told by the treatment team and by the lawyers, and how we make our decisions. And there's 5 people voting. The judge or the person that's chairing never votes. The only time that person will vote is if the panel splits. If it's a 2-2, that the 2 people might say we want to give him grant him an absolute discharge, and others, 2 others want to give a conditional discharge. Then the judge or the chair of the review board will cast the deciding ballot to decide how that's going to go. So that's how the actual decision is made, and then we fill in that sheet, and then that person is let loose to be compliant with whatever orders are put in place. So the statutory tests of the review board must apply and require the least restrictive order on the individual, ensuring that they are, like I said earlier, keeping the patient safe from themselves and from others. The law assumes every accused is fit, unless it's determined by a judge after a fitness hearing that the accused is unfit to stand trial. And that's called a presumption of fitness, and that's in the criminal code as well. So it's another layer of complexity, that presumption of fitness, because in society, with our charter and with our criminal code, we assume that everybody's fit to stand trial. And there are a number of hoops and tests that these people have to go through to get that NCR designation. The criminal code itself, the structure of the process is mandated by the criminal code is there to address someone who commits a crime but is not criminally responsible, that NCR, due to a mental illness. It's important that people understand that they're not getting away with it, because they're not. You know, so many people, and it's, you really have to dig deep to understand and be compassionate with mental health and addictions. You have to be what I call tough on the problem and easy on the people. And you guys, it's really difficult thing to do, to find that compassion, to have a level of understanding and the equality of dignity of respect, dignity of respecting that individual and understanding how troubled their mind is and how messed up they really are. So a lot of people think that they are going to get away with it because they're on the review board and they've done something that's horrible, that they should just hang them high and be done with it. But that's not how we roll in Canada, and I think it's something that we all need to do a little bit better in terms of educating ourselves and understanding mental health and addiction a little bit more. So it's the process must be followed before someone is found to be NCR. They have to do that fitness test to be found NCR. It's not consent by the accused. It's not up to the individual that's accused. It's up to the experts to decide whether or not that person's going to be NCR. So the Crown acts as a vigilant gatekeeper to ensure that those who see it as an easy out, it's not that way. If they are not criminally responsible, they do not get through the gate. It's that simple. So the actual unfit to stand trial is defined in the criminal code, and it means that the accused person is unable, because of a disorder, to defend against the charge or charges that they are facing, or to tell their lawyer what they want to do with their case. So specifically, unfit to stand trial means the accused is not able to understand that they're in a courtroom, who the people in the courtroom might be, the judge, the Crown, their lawyer, and why they're there. Or the accused is not able to understand what they are charged with and what kind of pleas they can enter. And I've seen people in front of me going and they just don't have the agency or facility to understand, because their mental health is that bad. They just don't get it. So they don't know or don't understand whether they're telling the truth in court or not, or if the accused is not able to communicate with their lawyer and tell them, even in basic terms, what they want to do with their case. Because some of these people have the mental ability of a child. So they're, again, their agency and facility to be able to advise their lawyer, understand who's doing what within the context of that courtroom or that hearing room. So if a judge has reasonable grounds to believe that any or all of these are true, a judge will likely order a fitness assessment. And an accused who is not unfit to stand trial is then usually referred to a court as somebody that is fit to stand trial, or is simply fit, as they are, then they're dealt with via the courts and the prison systems. So is there a difference between fitness to stand trial or criminal responsibility? Fitness to stand trial and criminal responsibility are two different concepts. One does not affect the other. This means that if the person is found to be mentally fit to stand trial, a later assessment may still show that, so that when the crime was committed, they were not well enough to understand the nature or consequences of their act and should be found not criminally responsible. So conversely, the person could be found unfit to stand trial in the present, but a psychiatric assessment might show that they knew what they were doing at the time of the act and therefore must be held criminally responsible for it. And to me, it was absolutely fascinating to sit in those hearings and watch the patient or our client try to explain why they're there, what they did. Something as simple, we would sometimes ask questions, which person is your lawyer? Which person is the judge? Which person is the lawyer for the government? Which one's your doctor? And from time to time, we'd have people that couldn't answer those very, very basic questions. They'd look at their lawyer and hope that person could answer their question for them. So those are important for us to formulate our personal decisions based on what we see, how they respond to questions that we ask. And for me personally, again, I felt that was the most telling part in taking my responsibility seriously, is really paying attention to how that person is responding to questions, is responding to treatment. And that helps me formulate my decision when I say we're going to let that person go, or we're going to hold them, or we're going to attach conditions. So it really does tell a very, very interesting story. So I'll talk a little bit about the treatment team. The input from these disciplines in the treatment team of the patient, they have their decisions and recommendations that they put to us. So we have a pre-board meeting, and the role of the treatment team at that meeting is a gradual one in which the patient earns the trust of the people that are treating him through behavior, through demonstrated insight that leads to increased privileges, and those are only earned if extremely incremental in nature, literally baby steps. They have to behave their way to success each and every day, each and every hour. And that full reintegration can usually take years or decades of treatment. There are a few patients out there that have been in Alberta Hospital pretty much their whole life. And one particular fellow, you guys, his parents have been with him every step of his way. So it would be like if I was in Alberta Hospital and my 93-year-old parents were at Alberta Hospital for every hearing. So the level of love that you see and the level of dedication of family is remarkable in that particular arena. So the detailed report that gives us the whole background, including the history of the patient's progress over time, so that we can take a look back and assess the current situation and the recommendations of the treatment team that they had recommended. So the point is that we take longer to view that patient, and we look to see what has happened in the past, and now how that person has responded in order to judge the current recommendations. Because even in the short 3 years that I was there, I saw people from the time they were brought to Alberta Hospital, the first time they were in front of the review board, and you saw the diligence of the treatment team and the love of family, logical or biological, the support they had, the hard work that they did. I saw them get better, understand, get on their medication, and get on with their lives. So it's possible to do that good work and to do that treatment with support. The patient can also speak and answer questions from the board. They also may bring family or friends to the review board hearing, and they may also bring witnesses to speak to their conditions and insight. Now, at this point, I want to talk a little about victim impact statements. Victim impact statements, I think everybody knows what those are. That's when if I had my best friend was murdered, I get to write out, and it's very restricted, and there's very strict rules on what I can say and what I can't say in victim impact statements. Now, again, this is another level of complexity, you guys, because what happens with the victim impact statements, the criminal code isn't really clear on how much weight we can give to those victim impact statements. And man, they're so helpful in so many ways. And I can tell you, I had to hold back tears more than once when I listened to victim impact statements. But we also have the obligation to listen carefully to what they're saying, and sometimes to what they're not saying when it comes to formulating our decisions. So victim impact statements are used at the review board, but the weight of those victim impact statements are something that the jury is still out on. If you do a Google on victim impact statements and their admissibility and how they work, you'll learn. We could spend an hour talking about them because of the rules, that what you can say and what you can't say. The other thing, from a judicial or quasi-judicial approach, because our board is not a judicial panel, it is a quasi-judicial panel. So when you go to court, that's a judicial matter. When you're in front of the review board, that's a quasi-judicial matter. So cross-examination is allowed. So the lawyers that are in the board and presenting to the panel, they have an opportunity to cross-examine any witnesses and certainly the patient as well. And again, that's part of what we can do. We can ask those difficult questions. Generally, the panel takes a view that we try to leave the most vigorous cross-examination up to the lawyers. If we're not sure or there's a point of contention, any one of us could ask questions of any of the patients. And it was always interesting to see how they managed answering questions. There was one young man that murdered a guy, and we had two sheriffs, one on either side of him. And this guy was just, all he did was work out, and a scary guy. And he was combative, and he argued with us, and I just want to get the fuck out of here, excuse my French, but that's what we hear in front of that board. So what does that tell us? This guy is going to go right back into detention, and he's going to stay there and hopefully get the treatment he needs. My sense is people that are that profoundly mentally ill are going to be in the system for quite some time. So the victim impact statements, like I said, I'd welcome you to take a look at that online. I don't want to spend a whole lot of time on that particular part of the story. And I think I'm going to open it up to questions right now, Larry, because we only have 10 or 15 minutes left, and I'd be happy. I could go on and on here, but I'm happy to open it up to any questions. And again, I remind people that it's just my opinion. I'm not a lawyer. But I'm happy to answer any questions that folks might have around what I've said thus far this morning.
Good. I'll try to moderate and get the questions. Roy initially had a question, and I'm not sure whether it's the same question with your hand up, Roy. So let's start with you. Before you do, you have the choice either of putting your hand up physically or using the electronic hand. Roy, please.
Thank you, and good morning. Murray, I'm interested in knowing the connection that this tribunal, if you will, has with Alberta Health Services, and whether it is, in fact, in jeopardy with Danielle Smith's intention on revising Alberta Health.
Good question. And I wish I knew the answer. I can tell you that the UCP government interfered with the work of the review board. And that's why I left and the rest of the panel resigned. So the political interference is a real thing. The review board itself is a agent of the provincial government, not of Alberta Health Services. but the people that present to us, everybody out at Alberta Hospital, that's all Alberta Health Services. So will it have an impact? Roy, I would suggest it would. Particularly, I have no idea what she's gonna, if she's gonna make another wholesale change and clean the current board out and start off new. But they, you know, when Kenny took over and started to get involved with the review board, like I told you, I wrote the educational document. I educated the chair of the review board, didn't even know what the review board did, for heaven's sakes. I had to explain to him, well, this is what happens. This is not NCR. It's kind of, I went off the same document that I was talking to you about. So to answer your question, Roy, I'm concerned. This government, I think everybody should be concerned in terms of their draconian approach to managing our province. But stay tuned. Well, you never know in this province what's going to happen next. But hopefully it won't have a big impact.
Jan had a question about whether it's always the same judge on the thing. Did you see her question, Murray? It
No,
flashed
I
up very
didn't see it
quickly.
on
I
my
think
screen
I
here. How it works is that the province is split in two, and Jan, if this doesn't answer your question, you can pop in and correct me or ask additional questions. We are split north-south, and there's hearings that take place in Calgary. There's hearings that take place in Edmonton. And the chair or the judges of the panel very, very seldom are the same people together. The 5 people hearing the case, it changes nearly every review board. From time to time, there would be maybe 1 or 2 of us that had been on the panel previous. So they rotate people through. So it's different people dealing with the different clients, if you will. So it's not the same people hearing the same arguments from the same person. So I think that brings another round of fairness to the approach of how the hearings are handled.
Could I ask Murray whether there's an appeal from a review board decision, and to whom, if there is an appeal, to whom
it can go to the Court of Appeal and have it overturned. And then if it can go, if it hits the judicial realm, the review board decision goes to the judicial courts and can inevitably end up at the Supreme Court of Canada. That's how what the WINCO test, and that's spelled just like it sounds, like wink with an O on it. If you want to Google the WINCO test, you'll see that it's our job to, if they aren't going to hurt themselves or others, we have to let them go. We have to let them go. And again, it's everybody's best test whether this Bob guy is going to go back out and hurt somebody or hurt their family or whatever they're going to do. But that's the WINCO test. And again, that's the level of complexity that we have in every decision that we make. So yes, it can go to court and it can go all the way to the Supreme Court. And then that has an impact on all the review boards in Canada in terms of in terms of case law or jurisprudence.
Jan had another question concerning whether these are paid positions on the review board.
Review board, there's an honorarium. You're not going to get rich
That's
doing
an
it. You get, yeah, it's an honorarium. You get paid for your lunch, and it's a few $100 for every hearing day. But no, you're not gonna. It's like the police commission. You get honorarium and a free lunch once in a while, but it's
if you're lucky,
important.
You're not losing money in consequence of the.
That's because I'm driving all the way out to Alberta Hospital and everything, but yeah, it's like a lot of the other board and committee work.
Eric.
Thanks so much, Marie. This is really, really interesting. A couple of things. One is, I think, and I'll try to remain apolitical here, but having sat on a few different government boards, the importance of having people with a diverse life experience and knowledge is so important. And to have only medical people on the review board, you need people from the community in general. These are things, and we need to guard against boards becoming solely one thing, if it's only the police or if it's only the medical or only that. So that's as far from the straight and narrow on the apolitical I can be, but I just thank you for your service. But really, having served on a couple of boards and seeing the value of so many different voices from the community coming forward and the knowledge that you gain from having those people there, it's very important. The other part is, as working as a social worker, same challenge, determining competency. You know, when is it, you'd think that it would be safer to keep this person under controlled situations, but if you cannot prove that they are not competent to look after themselves, you cannot say that. You cannot say it. It's a tough decision always, and particularly when it rises to the level of the review board, where the impact on the community is so much more severe. But I just wanted to say I appreciate the challenges of determining what the future is going to be. I used to always want to drag out my crystal ball so that I could see, but unfortunately that never worked. So that was it. Thank you very much, Murray.
You're welcome. Good to see you, Eric.
Are there any other questions of people? If Roy, I see, or did
I'm just wondering if you know of an individual who's having problems with addiction or depression, how do you direct them so that they can get that type of review to see if they can, in fact, remain living on their own?
It's really difficult. I believe and Eric, you can help me here. I think there's a 311 number is the kind of the first place to start with mental health stuff. But the first step, and again, Eric can jump in perhaps more than I, that person really has to be willing to do the work and get the help. And that's really difficult, because when you're caring for anybody, or if you have anybody in your circle or your family that you recognize needs some help, if they aren't willing to get the help and do the work, it really makes it difficult. But there's resources. Eric, do you have a best point of entry?
Yeah. And I've been retired from the business for a while now, Murray, and the brain cells are starting to fade rather quickly. But it used to be, if you felt there was a clear and present danger, you could call community mental health and they would come out and do an assessment at the door. And if they felt that there was a danger when they were speaking to the person at the door, they could take them in for a compulsory assessment. I can't remember the exact details. As I say, Murray, it's been a few too many years now, but I believe that was the process. It was to call community mental health to say, here's the situation. I am very concerned about this person. Would you please do an assessment on them? But it was, I mean, again, if somebody refused to answer the door or that sort of thing, there would always be a problem. I see Larry has got his hand up, so he could probably share more about that.
there's a real spectrum of issues and of approaches to an issue. If, for example, you're speaking about addiction, no criminal behavior, or at least no proven criminal behavior, then family interventions and things like this will work. If you're dealing with someone who has holds a job, then an equivalent sort of thing can be done with a boss or a licensing authority or so on. The order that, like you, I don't know the details. If an individual is deemed to be a danger to himself or others, and I've dealt with this with a friend who had early Alzheimer's, then they can be held for a period for assessment and treatment, but that needs to be renewed every 30 days, and there's an appeal through the court and so on. This system that Murray is talking about really comes from the court, from people who have committed crimes, serious crimes, who then the evaluation, and I guess my question to Murray was going to be the habitual offender, which I gather is a purely a legal process. How does that tie in to the review board. It doesn't have any connection at all.
Well, recidivism within the review board runs between 35 and 50%. And it just goes to the mental health and addiction issues and the treatable nature and how much we don't know. So I go back to what I said at the very beginning is it's everybody's best guess in terms of how unwell they are, what the treatment team finds, what medication they're going to have. And we could do another hour just on medication and psychotropics and kinds of medication. And because they impact different minds, different bodies, different ways, different weights, different color, different race, it's so darn complicated. So, you know, you really have to, you know, the mind's like a parachute, functions best when open. And on that review board, you really have to keep your mind open and pay attention to everything that's being said. And like I said earlier, to things that aren't being said as well.
That really, I think, so much of that is the fundamental question that neither the medical system nor the legal system deal terribly well with uncertainty. We can deal with uncertainty in terms of statistics and large populations, but when you come down to making an individual assessment, whether it be in the context of a review board or simply a clinician trying to decide the best treatment, we really often don't know, and we have to work with the best that we have. Murray, I'm going to give you, we've got 4 minutes left. If there are any other questions from the audience that I've missed, please speak up now. If not, Murray, I'll ask you whether, you know, what your closing remarks would be, and certainly.
Well, I always encourage people to take a look at both municipal, provincial, and federal boards, agencies, and commissions, particularly those of us that are in our senior years. Get involved in those things. Apply. You can go to the different websites at all levels of government on boards, agencies, and commissions, and get involved and bring your voice and bring our community to that table. And particularly as seniors, you know, as we get older, we all feel less relevant, less involved. And I know it's a commitment and I know it's difficult, but I always encourage people to get involved and you know, you don't always have the right answers, but you surround yourself with good people and you just do the best job you can. I know with the review board and in life itself, you know, I'm not indecisive, am I? Well, I'm trying to make a decision sometimes is really darn difficult. You know, making them for ourselves is difficult, never mind in a board, agency, or commission kind of role. But it's been a real honor to have the opportunity to join the group again today, and I will say hasta la vista. I'm off to Mexico next week, and I will be back sometime in the spring, and I love being grown up. Good to see everyone.
Thank you so much for giving us a great talk and an even greater example of how to do it. Your work for the community has been ongoing, and we're a better community for your work.
Well, thanks for your kind words, Larry. It's been my pleasure, and it continues to be.
We're at the hour. I am going to close by thanking Murray again, thanking you all for being here, and hoping that you can join us next week when we will have Darren Hagen, who Darren, as you know, is a playwright, performer, and advocate who will talk about whatever Darren plans to talk about.
That's going to be enjoyable.
We will enjoy it. We will enjoy it. I have every confidence of that. So please join us then. Goodbye all. And for the organizers and Murray, if you wish to debrief, we'll sign back in.
Okay.